James Carter never imagined his routine morning drive would turn into a nightmare. Tikor, a young driver lost in distraction and chaos, veered violently across Highway 72, leaving destruction in his wake. In just seconds, James witnessed 5 innocent lives ripped apart, a horrifying crash that no one could stop. What drove Tikor to careen through traffic with such deadly force, and could anyone have predicted the tragedy before it was too late? The morning on Highway 72 was deceptively calm. The sun had barely risen, casting a soft golden glow across the asphalt, and a light mist clung to the edges of the road. Most drivers were just starting their day, unaware of what was about to unfold. Trucker James Carter had been on the highway for hours, hauling a heavy load of construction machinery across state lines. The steady vibration of the rig and the rhythmic hum of the engine were comforting to him, a familiar background to his long, lonely drives. He kept his eyes on the road, alert but relaxed, scanning for anything unusual in the traffic ahead. In the distance, James noticed a small white car moving erratically. At first, he assumed it was a young driver still getting used to the early morning commute. The car weaved slightly between lanes, its movements almost imperceptible at first, but there was a tension in its rhythm, a subtle unpredictability that made James tighten his grip on the wheel. Other vehicles swerved around the white car, some honking and warning, yet the driver seemed oblivious. Something about the way he handled the vehicle made James's stomach sink, a sense of unease that he couldn't shake. The highway, usually filled with noise, the rumble of tires, the hum of engines, and the chatter of radios suddenly felt quiet. It was as if the road itself had paused, holding its breath for a moment that James could not yet foresee. Every second stretched longer than usual. The mist, the soft morning light, the distant shadows of overpasses all combined to create a surreal atmosphere. For James, there was an instinctive warning in the air, something primal, a feeling that disaster was near. Other drivers appeared distracted or confused, some slowing down to observe the strange behavior of the white car, others trying to maneuver around it. James noticed a family sedan slightly ahead, moving cautiously, its occupants likely unaware of the looming danger. He realized that if the car continued on its current path, collisions were inevitable, but there was nothing he could do to stop what might happen. The sense of helplessness pressed on him as he kept driving, trying to maintain distance, while the white car's movements grew more unpredictable. In those early moments, the highway seemed ordinary, yet James felt an invisible thread of tension winding tighter with every passing second. It was a calm before a storm, one that would erupt violently in ways no one could imagine. The ordinary morning was about to transform into a nightmare, and James, trapped in the cab of his massive truck, was about to witness something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Suddenly, the calm of the morning shattered. The small white car jolted violently into the next lane, narrowly missing the sedan James had been watching. The metal screech of tires against asphalt filled the air, cutting through the faint hum of engines. James slammed his hands on the wheel, instinctively hitting the brakes, but his massive truck took a long moment to respond. The road seemed to twist beneath him as he fought to maintain control, his eyes locked on the chaotic movements ahead. Tikor's car weaved dangerously, striking the sedan on its side. The impact sent the smaller vehicle spinning out of control toward the roadside, where a cyclist had been pedaling along the shoulder. The cyclist barely managed to swerve, but lost balance and tumbled into a shallow ditch. Seconds later, a motorbike approaching from behind collided with debris, sending its rider sliding across the asphalt. The scene unfolded faster than James could process. Each second brought new horror, each movement more unpredictable than the last. People on the highway froze, some stepping out of their vehicles in disbelief, others crouching behind their doors, helpless to stop what was happening. Tikor's eyes were fixed on the road ahead, his foot pressing harder on the accelerator. It was as though something had taken over him, pushing him forward on a path of destruction that no one could interrupt. From the cab of his truck, James felt a mix of adrenaline and dread. He knew he could not intervene directly. His truck was too large, the chaos too sudden. He could only watch, powerless, as the small white car advanced toward an intersection where pedestrians were gathering. Time seemed to stretch, every heartbeat echoing in his chest. 5 people were directly in Tikor's path, waiting unknowingly at a crosswalk. James's instincts screamed at him, a warning that disaster was inevitable. The world slowed, and in those frozen moments, the highway transformed from a routine commute into a stage of impending tragedy. The mist clung to the edges of the road, the morning sun reflecting off metal and glass, painting the scene in stark, surreal detail. James braced himself, gripping the wheel tightly, his knuckles white. The sense of helplessness was suffocating. There was nothing he could do to prevent the collision, nothing anyone could do to stop the chain of destruction that had already begun. In an instant, the ordinary morning had turned into a tense countdown, every second a reminder that horror was about to strike, and lives hung precariously in the balance. The moment of impact came faster than anyone could react. Tikor's car surged forward like a bullet, crashing into the crosswalk where 5 people had been waiting. The sound of metal colliding with obstacles, tires skidding across asphalt, and objects being thrown in every direction filled the air. The chaos unfolded in a blur, each movement sudden and unstoppable. James, still in the cab of his truck, could only watch in horror as the scene erupted before his eyes. The pedestrians were caught entirely off guard, frozen for a fraction of a second before the collision. The car's momentum carried it forward with brutal force. Nearby vehicles swerved desperately, horns blaring and tires screeching, but there was no room, no time to prevent what was happening. From his elevated position, James could see the way Tikor's car had carved a path through the crowded intersection, leaving destruction in its wake. Pieces of debris scattered across the asphalt, bouncing and spinning as the vehicle continued forward. For a moment, the world seemed to slow. The morning sunlight reflected off the shattered glass, creating sharp flashes that pierced James's vision. The highway, once orderly and predictable, had transformed into a scene of utter confusion. Drivers abandoned their cars, rushing to assess the damage, their movements frantic and uncoordinated. Some tried to help the victims, while others simply froze, unable to comprehend the magnitude of what had just happened. Tikor's car finally came to a halt a few meters beyond the crosswalk, smoke curling from the engine and tires. The small white vehicle, now battered and dented, seemed impossibly still compared to the chaos around it. James sat frozen in his truck, his body shaking, heart hammering against his ribs. He could not believe the scale of the disaster he had witnessed in such a short span of time. Emergency sirens began to wail in the distance, a grim reminder that help was on the way, yet the damage was already done. Witnesses gathered cautiously, some in shock, some screaming, all trying to comprehend the sudden violence that had shattered their morning. The highway had changed in an instant, and lives that had been ordinary and unremarkable a minute ago were now altered irrevocably. Tikor's motives remained a mystery, but the consequences of his actions were undeniable, leaving everyone on the road to grapple with the reality of the horrific crash. The aftermath of the crash sent shockwaves through the community. Emergency responders arrived within minutes, their sirens cutting through the tense morning air. Paramedics rushed to the victims, assessing injuries and providing immediate aid, while police secured the scene and began documenting every detail. The highway, once a routine artery of daily life, was now a cordoned-off zone filled with flashing lights, emergency vehicles, and a stunned crowd of onlookers. James remained in his truck, his hands trembling, unable to shake the images of the collision from his mind. Authorities quickly began piecing together what had happened. Witness statements were gathered, and surveillance footage from nearby businesses and traffic cameras revealed Tikor's car weaving dangerously for several minutes before the crash. Each clip added clarity to the sequence of events, showing a pattern that seemed almost deliberate. Experts examined the vehicle, noting the speed, trajectory, and damage, all of which painted a picture of chaos that escalated with alarming speed. Tikor was taken into custody, his demeanor calm yet detached, offering no explanation for the destruction he had caused. Investigators dug into his background, uncovering a history of reckless driving and minor traffic offenses. While these past incidents hinted at poor judgment, they did not fully explain the extreme violence of the crash. Toxicology reports showed traces of substances that could impair coordination and decision-making, but questions remained about whether they were the true cause of his erratic behavior. James was interviewed extensively by police and media, recounting the terrifying moments from the cab of his truck. His detailed observations proved invaluable, helping authorities reconstruct the crash with accuracy. Every twist, swerve, and moment of hesitation in Tikor's car was documented, revealing how narrowly disaster could have been even worse. The footage, combined with witness accounts, began to paint a chilling story of an ordinary morning turned catastrophic in mere seconds. Public outrage grew as news of the crash spread. Families of the victims demanded answers, and the community grappled with shock and grief. Experts debated the nature of Tikor's actions. Were they a tragic accident caused by substance use and distraction, or something more calculated and deliberate? The investigation continued for weeks, uncovering evidence that complicated the narrative and left many unsettled. As the highway returned to a semblance of normalcy, the memory of the crash lingered, a haunting reminder of how quickly life could change and how a single moment of chaos could ripple across countless lives. Weeks after the crash, new details began to emerge that shocked the public and complicated the investigation. Medical experts revealed that Tikor had been secretly struggling with a neurological condition, one that could cause sudden episodes of disorientation, aggression, and impaired judgment. This revelation cast his actions in a new light, suggesting that the terrifying path of destruction might not have been fully intentional. Authorities debated whether his condition could explain the erratic driving, or if deeper negligence and recklessness were also to blame. Despite the medical explanation, the consequences of that morning remain painfully real. 5 lives had been irrevocably altered, and families continued to grieve while searching for answers. Memorials began to appear along the highway, simple arrangements of flowers, candles, and photographs marking the exact spot where the tragedy had occurred. Drivers passing by slowed, paying silent respects, as if acknowledging the fragility of life and the randomness of the disaster. James returned to driving, but nothing about the highway felt the same. Every crosswalk, every intersection, every patch of asphalt reminded him of the crash. The memory of Tikor's car weaving uncontrollably and the helpless pedestrians haunted him, lingering in his thoughts long after he parked his truck each night. The images refused to fade, leaving a permanent imprint on his mind. The legal case against Tikor became complex. Lawyers argued over culpability, taking into account both the neurological condition and his history of reckless behavior. The media closely followed the story, sensationalizing aspects, while families of the victims fought to keep the human cost at the forefront. Experts weighed in publicly, debating whether this incident was a tragic accident, a medical crisis, or a preventable disaster born of negligence. Public opinion was divided, with no simple answer to what had caused such a horrific event. The highway slowly returned to its routine, but the shadow of the crash remained. It became a cautionary tale, a story repeated in driver safety courses, local news segments, and community discussions. James, Tikor, the victims, and their families were forever tied to that fateful morning, each life touched in ways that could never be undone. The incident raised difficult questions about responsibility, chance, and human error. Ultimately, it left a haunting truth. Some tragedies can never be fully explained, and in a single moment, everything ordinary can become unimaginable.